Today, I'm gonna change your mind about fruitcake with my grandma's white fruitcake recipe. It has tons of goodness in it, none of that gross colored fruit stuff. It's so easy to make. I'm gonna show you how you can make this just like this, give it as gifts, keep it for yourself. It's that good. Let's make it. Now, usually I would say this is not your grandma's fruitcake, but guess what? This is my grandma's fruitcake. It's a white fruitcake, but we're gonna throw out the concept of those brick fruitcakes. They've gotten a bad rap. Okay, those old, heavy, gross fruitcakes. That's not what this is. It's a white fruitcake in that it doesn't have the dark color that a lot of traditional ones do with molasses and other things. And it's almost light, but not light. It has a lot of good flavors. I'm gonna talk about how we're updating it, how we're gonna add even more goodness and flavor to make it a bread/fruitcake you're gonna wanna eat. So we're gonna start with butter. Now this is room temperature or softened butter. And how you know that is, look, when I press into it, see how nicely it presses and leaves that mark? That's ready to go, meaning it's gonna cream well. So we're gonna put some sugar with it. Now, this is a fruitcake that isn't necessarily just cloyingly sweet, it has just enough sugar. So this makes 2 loaves, we're gonna add that right in, and what we're gonna do is start mixing that until it's creamed. That means lighter and fluffy, which is what happens when you add air into butter and sugar. So you can see what we're doing is actually making it lighter. It's fluffier, it's airier, that's what you want. So it does take a little while. You can do it with a hand mixer, as you can see. You can do it by hand if you want to. It just takes more elbow grease, or you can do it with a stand mixer. So I'm scraping the sides of the bowl. If you do this as you're baking anything, it just helps things incorporate more evenly. And that's the beauty of it. So now we're gonna add a little bit of sour cream, which isn't necessarily traditional, but it ups the flavor, adds kind of an offset, nice tangy flavor, but also increases the moisture of it, which to me, there is nothing like that. It adds just this nice creaminess, almost texture to it, and makes the result so much better. To that, I'm also just gonna go ahead and add the flavorings, which is some vanilla, a little bit, just a little bit goes a long way, and a very small amount of almond extract. Now, this is something my grandma always did. Grandma did not add any alcohol or liquor to this, which we're gonna talk about later. A little bit of almond kind of just creates this complex flavor that's really nice. So we're gonna mix in the sour cream just till it's well mixed. And this is where it could look a little broken sometimes, like when you do eggs, but don't let that scare you. Just stir it around, and you can see that's now mixed enough. And now one by one, I have my eggs ready to go. It's a lot of egg, but what we're gonna do is just add them in one by one. So I'm just gonna pour one in, and I'm gonna mix it in just to make sure it's incorporating evenly until they're all well mixed. I've mixed all the eggs, and you can see it looks kind of curdled, very normal. And now what I'm doing is zesting an orange to add in that extra oomph. This is another flavor component that just really ups it. An orange at Christmas, you know, there's a reason we dry oranges at Christmas and we use them. They were at one time exotic and wonderful gifts to give at Christmas. And so we still love those flavors to use. So on top of this, we're gonna add some dry ingredients. Pretty standard and pretty normal. We're gonna start with some flour, and I always lighten my flour with a scoop that's in it. It's kind of like self-sifting. You know, modern day flour, you don't really need to sift, but when you lighten it and nicely don't pack it in to the measuring cup, you add the right amount of flour if you don't weigh it. I'm just gonna level it off, put it right in, and then what we're gonna do is add in just a small amount, this is again, breaking from tradition, a small amount of baking powder. Just the texture it gives and the lift it gives, I think just makes it better overall. Of course, a little bit of kosher salt, we're gonna put that right in there. And then I'm gonna mix this together before we add our final components. Once that flour is added, you don't wanna overmix it. That can make things go coarse or dry. So you just wanna finish up, and then I always am gonna give it a final turn here with my spatula to make sure everything is mixing evenly, which usually is better with a hand mixer like this to make sure. Got a little bit over the bowl. You don't wanna let it go to waste, people. This is good stuff. You know, at Christmas we use sometimes a lot of ingredients, a lot of butter. Things get expensive, so you wanna make sure you don't lose any of it outside the bowl. So now we have what I'm gonna call the good stuff. The big deviation I have here is I'm not gonna use the putrid colored maraschino cherries that are that weird lime green and bright red that make no sense and have weird dyes in them. They don't have good flavor, I don't like them. I'm using a Yuletide mix. So this is a mixture of dried raisins and pineapple and cranberries, and it's a little bit of citrus rind, and it all comes together in a delicious flavor. It's a mix I order online. You can make your own and put it together. I really like how it has kind of a subtle nod to a fruitcake without being too much. And then we're gonna add in some nuts. So I toasted some walnuts. I think it's always essential. Anytime you're gonna bake with a nut, go through and just toast them first. One, they chop a lot easier. But if you don't, you're gonna have kind of a soggy, tasteless nut in your breads, in your pies, in your cakes. Always toast them first. That's how you're gonna add flavor to anything. Even if you wanna eat them, these walnuts have, you can even just, when you wanna know, taste it. So good. You get a nuttiness from it that obviously is a nut, but you get that toasted nutty flavor that you just can't mimic otherwise. So once they're chopped up, kind of roughly, I'm not worried about perfection here. Perfection is not for the kitchen. You wanna enjoy the process here. I'm gonna put in all these ingredients, get everything off my board, and we're just gonna fold this together. And you can see, it's a lot of that fruit and nut mixture, but this is the holidays. This is when we go over the top and we make things extra good. So we're just folding this together. There's no reason to feel like you have to mix with the hand mixer, but look how beautiful this is looking. So you wanna make sure you get to the bottom of the bowl, see how we're doing that, and see how it just now comes together beautifully. So I'm gonna grab my prepared pan so we can just finish it off. So I have 2 greased loaf pans, and now we're just gonna eyeball it. You can weigh this out if you want to. People, cooking and baking should be fun. Unless you're doing a bake sale and feel like everything needs to be perfect, you don't need to weigh it. You know what I did do? I kind of reworked my grandma's recipe, I should say, for this. I changed it slightly, modernized it a little bit. Sour cream is a new addition. But what's funny is I was looking at hers, and she must have at one time made it. She used to do a bake sale with my mom. And on her recipe, in her book, she had listed out every ingredient, the cost it was per loaf, so she knew how much she was spending, probably so she knew what she could price it at too, and if it was really worth it. So you can, of course, if you're giving these away or selling them, you might want to do that so you know, but it's just too cute to me that I could see Grandma, and I just know how good she was at things like that and how she would keep track. I loved it. So what I'm doing is I'm smoothing these out, and this is where I'm gonna take a little bit of care maybe to see if I eyeballed it correctly, and if I need to, adjust. But what we do now is we smooth them out into an even layer. Now, if you want to, this bread doesn't give a true crack down the middle, but there's one way, if you wanna try to have it get a crack, kind of like a banana bread would. So I'm gonna show you something. Let me grab one knife, which I have a knife right here, just a table knife. And if you, this is a good way to clean off your spatula too. If you draw this knife down the center of the bread before it's baked, like this, it will actually help it understand that it can create kind of a crack there when it domes slightly. Again, this isn't quite traditional, but if you want that look, it's just kind of a good way to do it. So now I'm gonna bake these, and then we're gonna talk about if you wanna booze it up for the holidays. Not booze it up, but make it more flavor, add in a little bit of that festive cheer, how you can do that after the fact. I took the beautiful loaves out of the oven. I mean, this is what I like. I like that slight crack on top. I think it's really pretty, and it's not near as ugly sounding or looking than some of the fruitcakes that get a bad rap. So I'm taking this one out, but let's talk about what we could do with this if you wanted to, don't have to. So at this point, you could let it cool. You could use it, you could put some butter on it when you eat it. It's a delicious gift, wrap it up beautiful, even keep it in a nice loaf pan. Isn't that a fun gift to give because then people can reuse it? What I like to do with them is add a little bit of extra flavor with some liqueurs. Now, a traditional English Christmas cake would, for various weeks before Christmas, add some liqueur all throughout. I like to do that with these too. And I'll add about 2 tablespoons every week if I make this right around Thanksgiving. It could be around 4 weeks, 3 weeks, it just depends. And you can do any type you want. Like an orange liqueur could be really good. I'm actually using a bourbon here because I really like bourbon with it. And I love to do this to start when it's warm, but then you can just wrap it, put it in the fridge, and you can then just every week take it out, brush it with some liqueur, and by the time you get to Christmas, you have this beautiful, richly flavored, kind of extra special cake. Now, obviously, if you have a lot of kids eating this or something like that, don't put any on. You could even brush it with like an orange simple syrup, and that could be really good, or just eat it straight like this, which I'll cut it here to show you. But you can see when it's warm, it soaks up that first amount of liqueur perfectly. Oh, and it smells so good. But that's one option. The other option, just to enjoy it. So you can see I popped this one out. We can set it over here. It is a little warm. You probably should let it cool fully before you're gonna cut into it, but I like to live life on the edge. Look at that beautiful fruitcake. Now we call it white because look, the interior is pretty much a white fruitcake. You can see little elements of the zest we have in there. that Yuletide mix. You can see the walnuts. It to me is such a special way to enjoy something seasonal and something delicious. And I think that's the important part here. And I love how delicious it is. You guys, I don't think you can understand. If you've always been like, what is a fruitcake? And you first make this one, you're gonna love them. It's delicious. Even without liqueur, richly flavored. You get the pops of orange, you get that dried fruit in there, you get the nuts that we toasted so they have a perfect texture and flavor, and that hint of almond, vanilla, mixed with the orange zest, the layers of flavor and the well-balanced depth of flavor. This is one for the books. This is one to print off, remake. This is one to give as gifts. And I can tell you this, it's gonna be one that you're gonna be making year after year because it's that good. It doesn't need to be Christmas to enjoy it. It can just be any special time. So what do I hope you do with this? I hope I change your mind on the idea of a fruitcake. I hope you share this video around so other people can say, hey, wait a minute, that's not what I thought a fruitcake is. It is now. So go to my website, wyseguide.com for this recipe, all my other recipes, and until then, enjoy the holiday season, enjoy Christmas in any way you can, maybe even this fruitcake.